Well, I need to talk about statin drugs again. When you look at a couple of facts here, number one, despite us spending twice as much money as all the other 204 nations in the world each year, Americans are less healthy than we used to be. Our kids will be the first generation of Americans who do not live as long as their parents. Now, that's very scary. That's a catastrophic event of biblical proportions. That is really a mess there. And then, when you look at the fatalities directly related to statin drugs and the whole idea of restricting cholesterol, we're talking about 1 billion deaths since 1952. And we're talking about, of course, not only America, but North America. We're looking at Canada, the United States, and Mexico, pretty much all of Europe, and the UK, and certain big cities in Asia and so forth, Australia, New Zealand, all the island nations. We're talking about 1 billion people. And fortunately, there's no statute of limitations on murder. Now, that's a pretty heavy charge, but I'm looking to start a class action suit on the principals that are involved in this, because this is so egregious that I can't pass it up. Okay? Now, I want you to get a hold of the books Epigenetics, The Death of the Genetic Theory of Disease Transmission, the book Dead Doctors Don't Lie, and the book Rare Earths Ventures. Those 3 books will give you the details and references of what I'm talking about here. We're talking about $100 billion worth of research, $100 billion worth of research in nutrition. So this is not something that I made up. We're talking about a wonderful double-blind randomized study of over 5,000 people for a 10-year period by a large, well-respected medical school. And this is a huge story. And you'll see what I'm talking about here in just a minute. This is so egregious, I can't let it pass. Well, let's look at statin drugs. Where did that start? Why? Well, as it goes, the story begins way back in 1901 when the German Navy went to Wilhelm Norman, a German chemist, and said, look, we need a synthetic smokeless lubricant for diesel engines for German submarines. And by 1904, he had accomplished that. Well, after the First World War, they didn't need that anymore, and so they sold the patent to a British soap manufacturing company, and they made a wonderful bar of soap, but they couldn't sell it to anybody because everybody's making their own soap. And then in the early parts of the Second World War, the British company sold that patent to Procter & Gamble. Now, Procter & Gamble made very good soap, and they couldn't sell it to anybody because people are still making their own soap. I can remember in the early 40s, I'm a little kid, I'm making soap with my grandma and my mom, so I can attest to that. And they really couldn't sell the soap very well, and so they decided between mid-1940s and 1952, they decided they were going to convert the soap into a cooking shortening. Okay, they wanted to replace lard, cream, butter, and eggs, and they were having a struggle selling it because Grandma and Mom loved their lard, cream, butter, and eggs because that recipe had been passed down for 25, 50, 100 generations. Everybody loved it, and nobody's complaining about it. And so Grandma didn't want to use a shortening that came in a can. She wanted to use all the fresh stuff, which she knew how to work and what to expect. Well, so Procter & Gamble decided they were going to get some help here. So they went to a guy by the name of Ansel Keys, who's a medical doctor who was on the staff of the medical school in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And he brokered a deal between Procter & Gamble and also between the American Heart Association, which is a relatively new professional organization at that time, to have Procter & Gamble give the American Heart Association $1.7 million to endorse Crisco as a healthier way to eat than lard, cream, butter, and eggs. Now, this is without any science. This was just, hey, we want to sell this. We're going to give you $1.7 million. You endorse it, and everybody will be happy. And so without science, the American Heart Association endorsed Crisco as a healthier way to eat, and they got a little bit of a bump there. They got a little bit of a spike of sales, but it still wasn't magic. And so Ansel Keys said, look, we need something sexier here. And so in addition to the endorsement of the American Heart Association, which was bought with $1.7 million worth of a gift to them, if you will, they prostituted themselves and endorsed Crisco. But now Ansel Keys said, look, we need some real magic here to get a big spike worldwide. And they came up with the Mediterranean diet, which has been the biggest hoax ever perpetuated against the world. The Mediterranean diet was a hoax. They looked at the Isle of Crete, where people were still in their late 70s and 80s, working in the fields, planting and picking. They said, well, whatever these people are doing, that's the Mediterranean diet, that's what we're going to do. And it turns out that they used some olive oil and this and the other. And so they said, okay, we have to have people using olive oil and coconut oil, salad dressings and cooking oils. We're going to give up lard, butter, cream, and eggs. We're going to use Crisco and oils. They came up with a Crisco oil, and they came up with canola oil, mazola oil, and all these various corn oils and soy oils and so forth. Well, this had all kinds of unintended consequences. One was low T, low testosterone, and the pharmaceutical company said, that's wonderful. We'll come up with a testosterone patch or injection or pill. And then there was ED, erectile dysfunction. That's wonderful. We'll come up with Viagra and Cialis. Being on a cholesterol-restricted diet and using statin drugs to lower your cholesterol, we can't make testosterone. You get all the consequences. And, of course, the pharmaceutical company loved it. They put out the patches of the testosterone, Viagra, Cialis, and they came up with extra estrogen for women who are going through menopause at age 30 instead of 60. And then we came out with what? Yes, statin drugs to lower cholesterol. I mean, that's a multi-trillion-dollar business. The pharmaceutical industry jumped in on that one and said, look, we're going to make a drug to lower cholesterol. And they created Alzheimer's disease as a short version. Alzheimer's disease is a physician-caused disease because 75% of your brain weight, the mile and the white matter of your brain, is 75% is 100% cholesterol. And so you want to avoid Alzheimer's disease. You want to reverse it. There's actually a double-blind, I don't know if you know this, Tom, there's actually a double-blind randomized study, a 10-year study on 5,000 people. 2,500 were on the supplement program in a certain diet. The other 2,500 were on a dummy pill. And the ones that got the special diet and the supplement program reduced over a 10-year period the rate of Alzheimer's disease over the group getting the dummy pills by 78%.